Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today we are going to unpack one single, incredibly powerful, and honestly pretty mysterious verse from the ancient prophet Hosea. It's a verse all about destruction, and it hinges on just one simple idea: knowledge. I mean, it's a wild question when you think about it, right? Can a lack of something, just an absence of information, actually lead to your complete ruin? Well, thousands of years ago, a prophet delivered a message that answered that with a pretty stunning and frankly kind of terrifying yes. And there it is, short, sharp, and so serious. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. But what does that actually mean? Is this about failing a pop quiz? Forgetting some crucial historical date? As we're about to find out, the real answer is way deeper and a whole lot more dramatic than that. All right, so let's get into it. To really get what this verse is saying, you have to look at the clues that are hidden in plain sight, right in the text surrounding it. Because this isn't just about what the people of Israel didn't know. It's about why they didn't know it.
So this really leaves us with two big questions we need to answer. First, what was this specific knowledge that they were missing? And second, how on earth could not knowing it be so catastrophic that it could wipe out an entire nation?
Okay, here's the big twist in the story. What most of us think of when we hear lack of knowledge, just simple passive ignorance, like you just didn't know any better, that's not what the source text is talking about. Not at all. The real meaning is much more active and a lot more serious. So this is the key. When the verse says lack of knowledge, it's really describing a choice, an active, willful rejection. It wasn't that the people couldn't find the information, it was that they were presented with it, with God's law, with God himself, and they deliberately chose to turn their backs on it. And this right here is the absolute heart of the matter. It wasn't an accident. It was a conscious decision. They didn't just happen to lack knowledge. They actively rejected it. And the proof for this is right there in the verses that come just before this famous one. And this is what that rejection actually looked like on the ground. In their daily lives, the prophet lists this complete and total breakdown of their society. No faithfulness, no love, just a nation filled with swearing, lying, murder, stealing, and adultery. I mean, this was not a nation that was simply uninformed. This was a nation that was actively ignoring the very laws it already knew. So that's the crime. Now let's talk about the consequences. Because what's so fascinating here is that the punishment that's described in the verse, it isn't random. It's like a direct, poetic mirror image of the crime itself. Just look at the powerful parallel structure here. It's incredible. Because the people rejected knowledge, God in turn says, I will reject you. And because they had forgotten the law, God says he will in turn forget their children. He's basically removing his blessing and protection from their future. The consequence perfectly and poetically fits the offense. And the end result of being rejected and forgotten by God was exactly what the verse promised it would be: destruction. And this wasn't just some abstract spiritual idea. It had a very real, very physical, and very historical outcome. In fact, this actually happened. Hosea's warnings were ignored, and the northern kingdom of Israel was conquered and scattered by the massive Assyrian Empire during Hosea's own lifetime. The prophecy was tragically fulfilled right before his eyes. But, and this is so important, the story doesn't just end there in judgment and ruin. Even within these really harsh prophecies from Hosea, there's this consistent pattern. Judgment is always followed by a promise of restoration and hope. This slide really lays out the entire theological arc for us. So, step 1, the problem is that Israel rejects God's law. Step 2, the consequence is that the nation is judged for it. But then we see step 3, this repeating pattern where God always spares a remnant and promises to restore them. And all of that ultimately points towards step 4, a final solution. And here is that solution, seen through a New Testament lens. If the original problem was a rejection of knowledge and wisdom, the ultimate answer is found in the person of Jesus, who is described right here as being the very wisdom from God. So this brings the whole idea full circle to this really hopeful conclusion. The argument is that through Christ, that cycle of rejection and destruction is broken. The ultimate knowledge of God is made available to everyone, which means no one ever has to be destroyed for rejecting it again. So after all that, what is the big takeaway here? If we boil this whole thing down, it's that biblical knowledge is so much more than just information you hold in your head. It's about relationship, and it's about action. All right, let's just do a quick recap. First, the lack of knowledge we've been talking about is an active rejection of God. Second, that rejection brings about a perfectly mirrored consequence. Third, the story of Hosea is always one of both judgment and the hope of restoration. And finally, and this is probably the biggest point of all, true knowledge isn't about what you know, but how you live. It's an active relationship, not just passive information. And that kind of leaves us with one last, pretty deep thought to chew on. If true knowledge isn't just knowing facts, but is actually proven by our actions and our relationships, then what do we really truly know? Something to think about. Thanks so much for watching.